Okay. All right. All right. It looks like we are live. Sorry for any of you who have been jumped on and waiting and seen my strange crinkled brow as I was trying to get Facebook to show me my live stream. So here we are. Thank you so much for being here. And to Whitney, I know it's a lot earlier for you on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. So thank you for coming on today. Super excited. It's actually been just about a year since you were on. And I have been following all of what you've been doing on Instagram and social media. And I'm blown away at the growth that you have on your Instagram page. It's incredibly authentic, the engagement. Kudos to you, and two, really want to learn from you about I know it's an incredible amount of work, but kind of some of the best practices that I can take away personally to do better on social media. So thank you for being here. And for those of you joining in, we will, Whitney will tell us a little bit about herself, and we want your question. So if you have one that's burning right now that you want us to definitely answer, go ahead, type it in the comments. I have my own question list, but it's not just about me, it's about you too. And it's always a lot more fun when we get your questions. And this time I attempted to use the polling feature of the Facebook Live. Anytime Facebook offers some new feature, I try to give it a test run. So if a poll pops up during the live, go ahead and give it a try so I can see how it works, and then I can tell you about it if you're doing your own live. So all right, so Whitney, tell us, a little bit about yourself and what you do as a dietitian. You're coming on to talk to us about social media graphics, but tell us about the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, so I am an anti-diet dietitian. I specialize in helping people heal their relationship with food, recover from binge eating, and manage stress. I realized recently that is a huge part of what I do is stress management. And then more specifically, I'm kind of niching down right now into helping entrepreneurs who feel inauthentic in their business heal their relationship with food and write their story so that not only are they healing their relationship with emotional eating and compensatory exercising or the diet binge cycle, but they're also learning how to write that into their story and bring that to their brand so that they are not just these brands of perfection and then feeling like they're never living up. Yeah.
That's really, that's what stands out to me. Online, there's so much of a lack of authenticity, and that's something that stands out to me about your Trust Your Body project Instagram page, that you are you keep it real, right? You really share your struggles, and I think it allows people to connect with you, but it's really scary, I feel like, to be authentic. I have a totally different niche than you as a dietitian, right? I'm a mom, and I have one of my kids is incredibly picky, and I did what I thought was everything right and felt like a fraud, right? I felt like I was doing something wrong, but I found as I've been more authentic and shared the reality that it's allowed people. It creates the ability for people to have a different type of relationship with you. People aren't on social media just to find things that are perfect. So I'm really curious as we kind of go through the show to talk about how you do that in a way that works and gets growth and engagement, because I'm sure there's some strategy to it as well. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that now?
Yes. Let's do that.
So I don't know if there's actually any strategy to it, which is probably an unsatisfying answer. I don't really have any problem being authentic on social media. I think because I was an only child and going online was one of the things that was always pretty comfortable for me. So as I got older, it's something where in college, I started my first blog ever, and I was really in my disordered eating. And so I used that blog as a tool to help me work through some of those thoughts. Granted, I would not encourage anyone to be doing that because that can be really harmful. And some of the stuff I put online, I know is harmful. And thank God it's not online anymore. But it's something that I've always been comfortable with. So being in this journey, like that's something I've always had to come back to, is like I can just hop onto my Instagram stories and be totally straight up with something that I'm struggling with or whatever. And it helps me get out of my head, because if I'm having a really bad day, for example, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I was like really in this funk, and I was just kind of feeling lost with my business and totally drained by my business. And so there was one day when I just couldn't get out of bed. It was like 4 o'clock, and I was like, I can't get out of bed today. And I hopped on my Instagram stories, and I was like, okay, I'm getting out of bed. And then I got out of bed, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to walk to a coffee shop. Like, this is all I can do today. And I talked through that, and it made me feel so much better to talk through it. And it also, I think, resonated with a lot of people who were messaging me like, oh my gosh, I thought like I was the only one who had days who couldn't get out of bed or whatever. And I don't know. I just think it can be a really powerful tool. I think there's definitely a tendency to like, for me to have moments where I share, but then not use social media as my best friend, you know?
Got it.
So I have boundaries around what I share on social media, and I have like not time limits because it's not that strict, but just moments where I'm kind of like, no, I need to go do this for myself and not post this. And the moments where I'm like, no, I need to talk about this. If I can find a message in it, then I'll talk about it.
And, I know a lot about your background in graphic design. So I think kind of this other information about kind of your personal story, I think is valuable. You kind of married the two together. So for people who don't know a little bit about your background in design and how you kind of put the two of those together. And then we'll start digging into kind of what are the steps that you go through when you're, creating, whether it's we're going to probably talk about visuals, right? For your feed, your images, those things. So kind of give us a little bit of that background before we transition.
Yeah. So I am totally self-taught. I said this in the interview last year, but I had a boyfriend in college who was in graphics. And so he kind of taught me that graphic design existed, really. And then I worked for various people along the way. I did internships in college where I was kind of forced to figure out how to do these things. And so I used things like Canva, but at the time it was like, PicMonkey or like Info Chart, or I forget what it used to be called. And all these things online that taught me the basics of like, this is how you lay things out, and like, this is what good typography looks like. And then eventually I ended up designing coloring books for a couple dietitians. And I volunteered to do it because I was interning for them, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to teach myself and kind of make it up as I went. And that was really fun and very stressful, but it taught me like everything I know, which was cool. So that's how I ended up doing that. And
I think your ability to kind of look at typography and images and put together things that are visually appealing. So let's kind of start there. So what, as I start my questions here, what are the steps, I think, in creating a design for social media? So if you're like me and you don't feel that you have, you kind of like, okay, what should I need to put something together, and you work really hard at trying to think up something that's going to look pretty, whether it's, I don't take great food photography, I don't really feel particularly witty. How do you come up with, creating a design for social media? Do you come up with a goal first, a vision? What goes through your head?
It honestly kind of just like comes to mind. So I go through these phases, and I'm sure everyone could identify this, of like, sometimes you're feeling really creative and other times you're like, my brain doesn't work. So when I'm in those really creative zones, I have one note on my phone that's just like all of my ideas. So things that come to mind, ways to communicate it. I'll hear myself when I'm talking to clients, like say certain things, or my clients will ask me a question and I'll immediately, or like right after, write it down so that I have the verbiage, because a lot of my graphics personally are based in like the things that we say to ourselves. So, and learning how to like reframe the thoughts that you're having in your head So when I do side by side comparisons, for example, and I do the thoughts above the picture, it's always like thinking of the concept first and being like, okay, this is the concept I want to show. How can I show it in a picture of myself or food or whatever? And then how can I basically just like play with the wording until I get it as short and concise as possible, which takes a while. But that's how I do that. And then in terms of just like, the white background, like graphics that I do on my page, it's really just if I have a specific concept that can be shown visually, I really try to like push myself to figure out how to design it. Otherwise, I try to just put a side by sides just do really well. So I'll have like, I think one of my, most popular posts was this one where it was like, what you say is I feel fat, and then what you mean is, and it's like all these different words, these different like feelings that you might feel. And that really resonated with people because it was like, right, they're forced to like make that connection. So that's been really powerful for me.
Okay. So I think that creativity zone is really important about making sure that when an idea comes to mind is, jotting it down and then creating a visual. I heard something that's really stuck with me about Instagram, and, if people will go to Facebook or Google if they want to read. People go to Instagram to see things that are cool, see things that are interesting, and that it is a visual platform. And we're talking, kind of right now about Instagram, and that whole what you just said is really valuable because you're taking a concept and you're making it very visual. So you're representing an entire idea in kind of a visual form. It sounds really easy, but it's personally, I think I find it to be a little bit difficult to kind of put all of that together. How long does it take you? Let's say you are going back to your list of topics and ideas. How long does it take you to kind of put together maybe, let's say, a side-by-side one?
Well, so I try to do those together. So I like to do them in bed at late at night because that's when I'm the most creative personally, which is like not the best habit, but I'm single and in my mid-20s, so I feel like I can get away with it right now. It's just like I don't have responsibilities to anyone yet. So but yeah, so I'll be like I'll take all the pictures, so I'll have the concept, and whether I'm like it's usually what I'll try to do is if I go get food, for example, or whenever I'm at this doctor's office that I work at, because she has really good lighting in there and like a really good, she has really nice like white backgrounds. I will try to like come up with a few different concepts, take a bunch of different pictures that I have so that when I get home, it'll like the pictures can kind of go to a lot of different things. So it enables me to like not have to have the full concept ready, but to have a bunch of pictures ready so that when I get home, I can like start to put them side by side and be like, okay, this doesn't make sense. This kind of makes sense. Is this what I wanted to say? I think all in all, if I end up doing like 3 or 4 side by sides in one night, the whole process might take me an hour to really like figure out what I want to say, make it look good, like arrange all the text on there, edit the pictures, which is a huge part of it. So I like it, and I do this all on my phone. So this is something that I don't even do. I mean, for my text and like I do it on Photoshop, so that's kind of hard to show. But there are apps that you can use on your phone that are really good, and I think editing
You should
the pictures.
share those. So when you say editing the pictures, so I want to get a little bit more granular here because I think sometimes people brush over some of the steps maybe when you're starting out the tools. So I don't do anything for Instagram on my phone. So if you were using an app to edit, you make your side by side on your phone as well?
Yeah. So, okay, here, I'll show you an example here. So I hope you can see this. So I took like this picture.
Okay. I can kind of see it, but.
Okay. Well, I took this picture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. And I have
you could probably if you have your computer up, you could probably screen share and even just show your Instagram profile and just point out the image if you've already posted that one.
I haven't posted it, but I have examples of it. So let me pull up my Instagram.
See if I can. Yeah, we'll move us over to and then we'll have you share your screen. So I actually think we've gotten a lot of good feedback when we actually use real visual examples, so you can kind of speak to some of that visual appeal. And when we talk about the mistakes that people make, you can maybe point some of these things out.
Okay, so this one, for example, I just posted it, and I did this on my phone. It wasn't people weren't loving this one as much. I actually did a poll last night in my Instagram stories of what design style everyone liked, but we'll start with this because I'll show how I did it. So this picture started much yellower. So the background was very yellow. The whole thing was kind of like muted, and it was just like, it was exactly what you would expect from an iPhone picture in an office. So what I do is I first fix the colors through Snapseed.
Snapseed. Okay.
Yes. And I can write down all of these afterwards and send them to you. Snapseed is one of my favorite photo editing apps on my phone. It's Google's photo editing app. Okay. And it is so powerful. You can like selective edit. So you can edit the whole thing like normal. Their editing tools are much more sensitive so that you've got like a lot more control over the range of color. The selective editing tool is really what's powerful. So you can like pick, if I want to make the background, which had a yellow cast to it, white, I like select it and desaturate it. And then I select my face, which is also like a similar yellow color, and I up the saturation there. So then it actually differentiates between the two colors, and you're just editing the background versus your face.
Got it.
It's very cool. The next thing I do, and this is like I can't believe I'm admitting this online, but I use Facetune to whiten the background. So this is the only way that I use Facetune, and I hate that I'm admitting it because I definitely speak out against Facetune, and I think if you're easily triggered by like body changing apps, then don't download it.
Yeah.
Because you can do a lot with Facetune that I do not support. But what I like is their whitening tool is the best whitening tool, in my opinion, for backgrounds, because it's not like, it's even and it doesn't get splotchy.
So it's isolating kind of you creating that white background. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
It's basically getting rid of the yellow casts and getting rid of the shadows in the background so that text shows up better.
Got it.
And that way you can really like take a picture that otherwise like I kind of blended into the background and make it so that I'm saturated, but the background's still white. And then you can like add text to it. So it's now the background's white, as opposed to before it was like really, you can't see this, but it was really like dark. So that's what I do. Then I put them together in layout.
So let's make sure. I have a question here from Brienne. She said, I want to make sure we covered it. I would love to know how to lighten the background without the rest of it. Is that possible? And that's what you're saying you use Facetune for.
I wouldn't use Facetune for that. I'd bring it into Snapseed first. So with Snapseed, you want to raise the shadows so that you don't have as strong of shadows in the background. And then you can use the selective adjust so that you can lighten the brightness on the background, but not on your face. But you have to make sure that when you're lightening the brightness of the background, that you also come in with the selective tool and select your face and like keep those colors the same. Otherwise it'll like spread onto your face and you can tell. It's like hard for me to, I wish I could give a tutorial on my phone, but
I'm actually going to try to figure out a way to, I don't know, get a video capture of your phone. Maybe I'll do some research. That would be helpful. But at least we know the two tools that you use. Did you just play around, or did you actually watch some tutorials or Snapseed? And is Snapseed fairly intuitive?
I've always used Snapseed. Hold on. Why is this pin? Can you see this little box? Whatever.
Yeah.
So I have always used photo editing tools, and one of my biggest issues used to be like over editing my pictures. So that's something that really bothers me, is when pictures are like really blown out or like really saturated to the point that you're like, we get it, like you use a saturation tool. I think that pictures should be brought to a color that is more similar to what it looked like in real life when the picture was taken.
Got it.
Because there's a certain level of quality that you lose in taking the picture. So it's just bringing it back to what it might have looked like in real life and then whitening the background.
Got it.
But no, I didn't watch any tutorials. It's honestly just playing around and like, and editing a picture and then coming back to it the next day and being like, do I still like this edit? Because I've definitely come back the next day and been like, whoa, chill.
That isn't very good. Well, maybe is there any other, before we kind of want to transition into a little bit about the caption writing and kind of that engagement part. So one, you've got this visual. So obviously people are scrolling in Instagram, right? And I just talked about how people go on Instagram because they want to see cool things, right? They aren't really there to read, or they Google it, or they read a blog post. They're on Instagram to see cool things. So how do you, one, you want to be visually interesting to look at. And then obviously you want people to read your caption, comment, and all of these things. So maybe, I know if you want to use this post or a different one, or maybe walk us through a little bit about that.
So one of the things, I mean, this one did pretty well. One of the things that I like to do is really show like dramatic differences in the actual photos, because that is what's going to catch someone's eye first. They're going to be like, oh, Candy, like what's this before and after? What are they saying? And then we'll come up to the text. Like they're not going to be caught by the text first. They're going to be caught by the picture first. So making sure that you're really doing that. I also found that putting, like if you're going to do something like this, like putting a Twitter, like a tweet on it, using one of these backgrounds, which I get from InShot, is an app, is an iPhone app. And it's InShot actually. So it's like literally IN shot is how I created this one. So you putting text on it and like having these different things. They have really nice text editing. So if you're not like a computer person, InShot is like very intuitive to use. And they have these like backgrounds that you can put on. So these fades, when I do like a gradient behind something, do so well. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the algorithm or what, but these gradients behind a white screenshot like do probably better than most of the things that I spend time on.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I like to always, these ones do really well too, just like with my face in them. So trying to get like animated in the photos and like really demonstrating this is like, you're upset and then you're happy, or like you're whatever it is. People are drawn to seeing people in photos. So having yourself and being comfortable taking pictures of yourself, and also being comfortable that like these photos by themselves are never going anywhere. They're just like pictures of me with like very little makeup on. They're not going to be glamour shots. They're just to get the job done. You know what I mean? You just gotta get the job done.
And I can kind of see, as you've been showing a few of those, how you're capturing kind of the attention, and then people are going to say, oh, that's interesting. Then they read your headline, then they might read your more definitive text. It might catch them. I got it.
And this is an example of how I use the same pictures, but like backwards. Like those are the exact same photos. I just switched them. And when you put a big title here, that also tends to catch people's attention, because they're like, they know what they're trying to think about first. And then they look at the photos and they're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm thinking about. As opposed to this one is like the same thing, but it's just the other way around. And I posted them within 2 days of each other, and it was like totally fine.
Really? So I didn't realize you did all of this on your phone. I honestly I don't want to say surprised. There's so many people using different scheduling tools, and you have Canva and Photoshop and all these fancy tools. The fact that you can do this right from your smartphone is just kind of blowing my mind right now. But to go back, you were talking about Snapseed. It's kind of like your workhorse. But InShot allows you, that's where you actually create the side-by-side, or did I misunderstand that?
So, okay, Snapseed first for the color editing. Okay. Then we bring it into Facetune to whiten the background, and then you got to erase it on your body so you don't accidentally look like black and white. Then we bring it into layout. So you bring your 2 pictures into layout, which is Instagram's like
App for
side by
creating
side
site. Okay.
app. Yeah. So layout is you just like throw the pictures in there, making sure there's enough white space at the top to put text. This is a little bit deceiving because these ones, like all of these, I created in Photoshop, and you can kind of tell because I have like a gradient that I put in at the top, and that's like a little more advanced and not something that you need to be doing. So we can go back up to like this one because this one is just on my phone. So I bring it into layout, which gives me this white line down the middle, and you choose your 2 pictures. Then you bring it into InShot, so it's like a 4-step process. Then you bring it into InShot, and that's when you put the text.
Got
The
it.
benefit of using InShot is that you can keep it all on your phone, so you don't have to constantly be going back and forth between your phone and your computer. The downside of InShot is that the your ability to like it's much more difficult. Like I have an 8+ and I still have difficulty like aligning things. So if you have a smaller phone, it's going to be really difficult to like move things around and resize and be able to like, if you have like multiple layers of text, like being able to manipulate the text easily, Canva would probably be better for that. Because then you have a little more power over like where you want the text to go. And especially Canva 2 has been amazing. So just like having things aligned is something that's like a huge pet peeve of mine. So if you don't have the patience for that, just bring it into Canva
Okay.
and do that on your computer, because that is going to be like probably the best way to go about that.
Okay. So I know I could talk about tools and things all day, but I want to kind of get back out and kind of talk about, let me go back over here. Talk a little bit more globally again about design and authenticity. We were starting to kind of touch on that, and caption writing. So we talked about creating the visual. So now we went through kind of coming up with translating a concept into a visual that's going to catch people's attention. Created a little bit of text, but you don't want to overwhelm them, right? Now they're coming to your caption because they're like, this person, I'm really interested in learning more. How do you craft your caption, and maybe even touching on some of that, voice and authenticity, and just start out small and get more in depth.
Yeah. So with my captions, I mean, everything that I do comes back to my ideal client avatar. And that's something that if we want to talk about like growth with my Instagram, I have to give a shout out to Libby Rothschild because I did her Instagram course. And that's why I started doing side by sides, is that they encouraged me to do it. And they were like, no, like you need to start doing these. So I was like, okay, fine. Like, I guess I'll do it. And it worked. Like it really is powerful. So, and if you look on your explore page, it's like all side by sides and like graphics and stuff like that. So, I mean, it makes sense. But yeah, when writing, one of the things that I did was with her, and then now I'm doing again with another business coach, is like really narrowing down your ideal client avatar and then speaking to that person. So as if you are like trying to inspire that one person, and then through that, you're going to inspire like a lot of different people. One of the tendencies of like difficulty that I have is talking like a little too much about myself and not like narrowing it down to be like actionable things that they can do with the information. So I try to, in the first line is like your subject line. It's like exactly what they can expect from the caption so that they want to click like read more and make it expand. Then it's kind of like, I like to think of it as like bullet points. Like you're taking them along a story and you're almost like breaking up your paragraph, if you will, into like different segments. And then at the end is some sort of like actionable item, whether it's like something for them to try at home or something for them to like, if you need them to go like click on your bio or like something like that, just at the end is like you bring it home and you kind of like finish off what you're explaining and what you're trying to do, and keeping it to the whole thing to one concept. So explaining, there's of course like 1,000 different like things that you could add to the concept. So really trying to like focus and like get rid of extra stuff.
Yeah, and I think some of those images you showed before, which were very similar, that use multiple graphics if you want to talk about multiple concepts, maybe, instead of trying to cram a bunch of stuff in a single caption.
Wait, sorry. What did you kind of like froze there?
Oh
Say that one
no.
more time.
Oh, I was just saying, rather than multiple concepts in the same caption, you've had similar pictures, just flip flopped and making small adjustments. You could use, multiple posts.
Exactly. And go back and recycle old content.
Correct. Okay,
Yeah.
so the whole point of our talk today is to, one, get better graphics, but I think there's this misconception that if it's just really pretty, that it's like a magic bullet, right? That even if it's extremely visually appealing, like if I just had a graphic designer make all my images, that I would do really well on Instagram. What's your thoughts on that, if I kind of throw that out there?
Yeah, I see that a lot online. So people who have like a specific eye for design and have a very like beautiful feed, but then when you go to the individual posts, they're not really giving any value, is something that really bothers me, because I'm like, I I don't really understand what your purpose, like I have no reason to come back here, because you can get a beautiful feed a lot of different places, but you can't get like value. So my Instagram is really something where I treat it as like a place where I educate. And that is a decision that I've made for myself. Not everyone is going to make that decision. And you don't always want to be like educating these complicated topics necessarily, which is why like I personally feel like my next step is going to be starting a Patreon, because like my Instagram is so educational that it kind of stands alone. Whereas instead of it being like a funnel for my coaching, it's going to be more of like a standalone educational tool that people can like pay to support me. So it's kind of like making that decision on what you want to do, what makes sense for your business, if you want to be, but like either way, figuring out how much value you're comfortable giving away and then executing that, but making sure you are still giving away some value. Otherwise, people are not going to know like who you are, what you do, what you know. Like it's hard to, having pretty pictures doesn't really say much these days. Like it's not that impressive.
So it's that value, right, that people came and that
Yeah.
they'll come back for, is that whatever is the concept that you're covering, or the education, that is truly important for growth and for engagement. So
Yeah.
okay, so let's talk a little bit about design elements like color, text, typography, and just because we just said, I mean, even making a pretty picture isn't going to immediately make you successful. There are some things that you want to pay attention to. So can you talk a little bit about just kind of the aesthetic of images?
Yeah. So, my best advice for people is to, and I talk about this in my Canva course that I did for RD to RD, which is like, pick your colors, pick your fonts, and stick to it. Don't like try to get all crazy with it and try to experiment with new things every time. Like people expect a certain level. I started experimenting with a new style, which is like the photo that I showed you all with the food guilt and food freedom side by side. I experimented with a new style. And then last night I did an Instagram poll and everyone wanted my original style back. And I was like, okay, well, that's what I get for trying to like branch out. Like this, no one wants, once they, brand recognition is so unbelievably important. You want to like see an image and be like, that's Whitney's image. And that's what happens with my stuff. I'll post an image and people are like, oh, that's Whitney's. Like my color is the same every single time. My text is the same. I use the exact same thing. In terms of like spacing and stuff, I mean, I think one of my biggest like pet peeves is when things aren't like evenly spaced. So you've got sort of like text that's like crammed up along the sides, or you've got, text like too close to each other, or you don't have enough difference in the sizing of fonts. That really stresses me out, because I'm like, you gotta do like hierarchy. So like if your title is big and then the text underneath it is smaller, and like really creating that visual difference between the different concepts and like highlighting the words that you want to be highlighting.
Maybe in a different color or a different font.
Exactly. Well, I definitely don't recommend mixing fonts. I like to keep one font or two tops if you've got a title font and then a body text font. But mixing fonts can get like real ugly really quick. So if you're not comfortable with that, I would say don't do it.
That's an easy tip to have. And I think one of the tips that you gave, I don't know if it's in your course or in our last interview, is really getting good at recreating what you like. So when you're scrolling social, I do it on Facebook. When I see something that maybe has absolutely nothing to do with my niche, but the visual representation, I'm like, oh, like 5 bubbles around this concept, I could totally see how that I would reuse it. So I snap a quick, screen capture, and then, I write it out on a little memo so that it, kind of puts it together. If you don't have to be, I don't want to say you don't have to be creative, but recognizing and then dissecting it down, how did they put it together, and then recreating it with your own content. When you shared that last time, it's been something that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah. People have to realize that, like, you don't obviously want to copy someone's logo or someone's like design, like on, like if you go to their blog and they design something really specifically, you don't want to copy that. But pretty much everything is a copy of something else. Like even recipes these days, it's so hard to find a recipe that is an original recipe. Like everything's been created. So if you can just make it your own, put a spin on it, and figure out a way to like it applies to your content so that you're not copying it like word for word by any means, then like you are creating your own version of whatever it is. And I guarantee they copied it from someone else too. Like no one is out here inventing designs anymore. That just doesn't happen.
That's really, it's a good point. I think we, rather than make it harder than it needs to be, make it easier, find someone who's doing it well, and then make that your own. So we talked a little bit about tools for design, and are there any others that, we talked about doing it all from your phone. And I really think that's an important message to get out there, that you don't necessarily have to be running back and forth between your computer and your phone. And it can be really time consuming. I hear that's a complaint, that people have to put it in Dropbox, and I have to run back to my, or, you're switching between or paying for a scheduling tool that allows you to post from your computer, to different profiles. So you do it from your phone.
Yeah, so I do go back and forth because I like to use Photoshop for a lot of this stuff. If I'm like in a rush or if I'm just in bed and feeling lazy, I'll do it all from my phone. The one thing that I do have on my phone is I use the Plan app, so I can like plan out my feed. It's PLANN. And I pay for it, and it allows you to look at your analytics of like how things are doing. It like keeps track of like your follower growth rate. It keeps track of the best time to post every day. So that really helps me. But what I found, and I plan out the way that I want my feed to look. So I have like a week and a half like planned out already. Some weeks I have nothing planned out and I'm just like putting things in. Other weeks I have more planned out. So it kind of just depends on how like on top of things I am. And I try not to like stress about it anymore because it's not that serious. Like it's going to be okay. But basically what I do is I like put it in here, but then I always post within the app. I like very strongly believe that schedulers for Instagram will totally tank the way that you show up on your algorithm. I can usually tell if I can't tell if someone's using a scheduler, but I can get an idea if someone's using a scheduler because it's just kind of like auto, like they throw it up and they have no story or anything to go with it. What I like to do, if I can, it doesn't happen every day, it didn't happen yesterday, was like I post native to the app. I always find that when I post in the app, it does better than when I post from Plan. And then I do stories like Instagram stories to explain my post, so that people know that I'm there. Like they can feel me on the other side of the phone. And I think a huge part of this like authenticity thing is to be like, she is really behind this app. It's not just like her business. It's not just like some social media intern posting this stuff. It's like her. And she wants me to understand this concept. And so if people tell me that they come back to my page and they come back to my stories to hear me explain it and to like, because they can, I don't know. I really believe that people can feel that stuff. of like if you're actually engaged. Also, my posts that always do the best are when I'm like really in the zone typing out the caption. I can like feel like when I feel really energetically like this is exactly what I want to be sharing right now and this is exactly how I feel in this moment, people respond to it for whatever reason. And I don't know if that's in my head or not, but it like to me this is what I've noticed where it's like people can pick up on like whether or not you're like you believe what you're selling.
You brought up Insta stories, so whether or not our story is an absolute must for, I think, growing Instagram. And then I want to kind of talk a little bit about, I know you're not do a lot on Facebook, you do Twitter, Pinterest, and maybe talk a little bit about those platforms, but Insta stories, and if you're not doing them, why should you? and it sounds like you use them to kind of add more explanation. I think people are like, well, what do I put in my Insta story? Or I don't necessarily know how to use Insta stories.
Yeah, so Insta stories are like really not, it's like not something you really need to overthink. I think people get kind of like caught up in their heads when they overthink it. It's like, again, it's not that serious, but you do need to be showing up in Insta stories because as we all know, the algorithm is so screwed. So if you're not showing up in Insta stories, people are going to forget about you. They're not going to see your posts. They're not going to be engaged. So the first thing you always got to do is like share your post to your Instagram story and just be like, hey, I did a new post. Go check it out. Give them a reason to go check it out. That's something I'm kind of lazy with sometimes because I like to explain. I think my draw is like to explain the post further and then they're more inclined to like go to the original post, read it, come back to the story. But I know people who will be like, they'll post the picture to their story by itself and be like, have you ever struggled with like X, Y, and Z? If you have, go check out, like go click my little bubble and like go check it out, which always works for me. So again, looking at other people's Instagram stories and be like, what am I drawn to? Like who on Instagram stories is like convincing me to go check out their post? And then how can I do that with my content? The second thing is Instagram stories is where people like find out your personality. So yeah, posts and captions are great. That's where people like first are drawn to me is they're like someone shares a post or someone whatever. But some of my biggest like spikes in engagement have been because I explain concepts fully on my Instagram story and people will send it to their friends and be like, hey, go watch this girl's Instagram story. Like it's really powerful. And I'll get all these messages and like all these new followers being like, oh my gosh, like that made so much sense. Thank you so much. The final thing I'll say about Instagram stories is actually two more things. One is Instagram stories are where you can be really authentic. So that's if I'm struggling with something, I'll post it in my Instagram stories. If I'm like, if I want to talk something out or vent about something, oh my gosh, people love when I rant about stuff that makes me angry, like diet culture stuff. Or like if I see something that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so diety. For example, when hearing people like talk about calories when they're out to lunch with their friends, I'll post that and then I'll get all this feedback from people like, I hear that all the time. I didn't even realize how annoying that is until you said something like, and so you're making people think about you when they're in their day-to-day life. And now I'll get messages like every time I hear someone do this, I think about you. And I'm like, that's what I want.
Right.
And then the last thing I'll say is that you have to be captioning your Instagram stories. You have to be writing out exactly what you say. Not like, you can skip the like fluff words, but I write out every little, like pretty much everything that I say in the caption on every single thing that I post to Instagram where I'm talking or Instagram stories when I'm talking, because people, one, either can't turn their sound on or won't turn their sound on. They want to be able to tap and hold and like read what you're saying and click through and read it without having to sit there and like listen to you.
But they like seeing your face too.
They like seeing your face. They want to know, like,
they can see the expression on your face. I think, exactly. I do that all the time with Insta stories, but I'm actually really curious right here because sometimes you do insanely long Insta stories, right? You get 15 seconds. So do you literally one by one them? I know some people will use like a app that allows you to like snip it into these little segments. What do you do?
I personally don't like snipping it because I end up talking for way too long I end up talking for way too long regardless, but if I snip it down, I don't like having to like caption each part because cuts off at weird times.
Got it.
I think personally, it's more effective to have like 15-second sound bites that you're like bullet point. Like Instagram is like a place for thinking in bullet points. Everything needs to be a bullet point. 15-second sound bites of like this, and then this, and then this, and here's the conclusion. And like, so I'll do these really long ones. And so if I'm on like a rant or if I'm explaining like a really complicated topic, I will record all of them and save them all and then go through and post caption as I post. If I'm doing something a little bit shorter, I'll like record caption post. I don't like doing that as much because I like the quicker turnaround time when you like record everything and then come back and like caption post. Like it keeps people like who are watching it in real time up with it, if that makes sense. Yeah, I actually had a friend who asked me that recently because she was like, do you like record all those first? Like, how do you do that? And I was like, it changes.
Yeah, I highly recommend anyone listening in that you guys definitely follow Whitney if you're not. Trust Your Body Project. One, to just try to get your arms around all that she's doing on Instagram. So we talked a ton about Instagram. So I feel like it's from me personally, I don't use Twitter a whole lot, but Facebook, it's very difficult, I think, to get up close and personal with people who follow you. It's just a little bit of an impersonal platform. Even live video, it's more difficult, I think, to really develop that relationship. So I think Instagram, I like Instagram. I hadn't used it, a year ago. I was like, what's Instagram? So I really do like the platform. So you also do, I know, YouTube and Pinterest, is this right? What about these other platforms?
So for YouTube, I've taken a step back on it right now because I'm trying to figure out if I even want to continue YouTube and if I just want to go full podcast. I will be doing some sort of format, either podcast or video, but the problem with YouTube is that it's one, really hard to break into YouTube, and two, editing takes forever and it drives me bananas. Like I would rather record an hour-long podcast and edit that and bring an editor on than have to like sit there and stare at my face for like 6 hours as I edit, because I get really like, I feel like you have to cut YouTube down so much. So I'll record for 15 minutes and then try to cut it down to 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And I end up just like, it ends up being like the jumpiest thing ever. And it just kind of drives me crazy. Whereas podcasts are like more long form. So you can keep a lot of the mistakes in and you can kind of like, it's a little more conversational, which I really like. So I think I'm going to end up going more like the podcast route, but that's like an entirely different thought process in my head. Pinterest is really important for blogging, if blogging is your source of traffic. That's also something that I've taken a backseat on right now, but using Canva for that is like the most amazing thing ever, because creating long Pinterest graphics is essential for Pinterest. And then I use an app called Tailwind to schedule my posts, which is like a whole other conversation, but Tailwind is awesome. And I think is like one of the best tools out there for driving traffic to your blog, other than like really good SEO. One of the things I'm doing now is I'll give a little background on Twitter. Twitter, I just started like 3 weeks ago. And what I like about Twitter, I started Twitter actually at Fancy. I like had my Twitter for a while, never used it. And then at Fancy, I realized there was like all these conversations happening on Twitter that I wanted to be a part of, especially with the whole like weight management versus like weight neutral approach debate that Christy Harrison was in. I was like, I need to be part of this conversation. So Twitter's a place where you can really be part of a conversation. And I think that is so cool. Like that's been something that I've been having a lot of fun with, because like I'm just engaging with people in a very different way. And then finally, Facebook. So Facebook is the one that I feel the most disconnected to, which is such a bummer because I used to absolutely love Facebook back in the day. And then it just like, did what it did, and it's a shame. What I'm doing now is I'm in a very intensive coaching program. And it's basically all centered around like having a sales funnel that uses Facebook advertising. So I think Facebook ads are going to be probably like my most powerful tool in terms of getting coaching clients and actually like making my business successful and making my business like really take it to that next level that I've been wanting to, as opposed to like trying to figure out SEO. Like I want to just hire someone because it drives me absolutely insane. So
Interesting.
Facebook ads, I think, is like, if you can find someone to teach you how to do Facebook ads, which is exactly what I did. I'm like, I really invested in this coach that I have for 90 days because their strategy worked. I found her through a Facebook ad. I got on her sales funnel. I got in her webinar, the free webinar. I did the discovery call. I was like, I'm sold. You did exactly what I want to do to other people. So
let's do it.
If you sold it to me, teach me how to do it.
Really interesting. Yeah. So we are, as always, running short on time. So I want to, before we wrap up, make sure that people know that you have a really awesome course on RD to RD about kind of how to get better graphics and kind of the whole concepts of graphic design. So maybe tell people a little bit about what's in that course, so in case they want to check it out.
Yeah, so my course on RD to RD is something that I made a year ago. So granted, like Canva has changed since then. But here's the thing that I think kind of holds true in the course, and something that I think you'll still find valuable, even though some of the tools in Canva and design options have changed, which is I go through the steps of like, one, figuring out what graphics you need to create. And then I teach you like how to think about graphic design, which is like the most powerful part of this course. Is it's teaching you how to look at visual, like other people's visual work, and make your own, and not just like copying what I do, but like literally how to think about it, how to think about branding, how to think about color theory, how to think about like what fonts that you should pick and like font hierarchy, how to approach, you know, what design is going to work best for your concept. So if you're like, I don't even know like half of what she's talking about right now, and you're like totally lost with this, that's a great course, because it really will like take you back to the basics and be like, okay, this is what even a brand is. This is what a logo is. Like, this is like how you can decide what's going to work best for like your attitude and your information. And then being able to think critically and like look at other people's designs and be like, this is how I'm going to replicate it. And this is what I should be looking for in other people's designs.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the real world examples in your course are really helpful when you break down kind of how other people have done their branding, and then you can start to digest that and say, oh, this is going to work for me. So it's really for people who want to do it themselves, but really want to use kind of best practices as that jumping off point, thinking like a designer. How can, making sure people know, I mentioned your Instagram handle, but if people want to connect with you, maybe give a shout out for your website, and I can put a link to your course and your website and such. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is whitneycatalano.com. So pretty much everything is my name, Whitney Catalano, which will be like spelled out on Facebook, you'll see. But everything except for my Instagram is my name. So you can find me like anywhere. You can just type in my name and find me. And then I think the same thing with RD to RD. It's just my name and the fast track to pretty graphics. So we'll link to that.
We definitely will. And make sure, if you haven't already downloaded Whitney's free checklist, she has that. It's kind of all of the graphics that you need for your nutrition business all in one spot, and her recommendations for tools and places to go to get images. And then last, her course, which she's been talking about, has one of her lessons is free, and it's 5 things you need to know before designing graphics for social media. Kind of goes through the things you should know before you jump in. So Whitney, it has been awesome having you on the show. I'm going to take a quick look over here, make sure we have Lorena said, spell it please, which I think we will go ahead and put links to the various things so that you don't have to write it down. And before we drop off, anyone who, we still have a lot of people on here, would like to ask any questions, feel free, but definitely agree with someone saying, I feel quicker with using laptop versus phone, using Later for posting and scheduling. Can you do side by sides with this app, or reposts? Is there a scheduler you would recommend if you use one? Which you mentioned Plan, PLANN.
Yeah, Plan is my favorite scheduler because if you pay for it, you get the analytics and you also get like, I think the analytics are your most powerful tool. I know that everyone wants to like schedule their posts, but like I think if you have a platform that schedules and does analytics, it doesn't do reposts. So if you like having the little like thing at the bottom that's like this has been reposted, then you can kind of like use a separate app for that. I have other apps that use that. I personally just like to like screenshot and then just make sure that I have like I shout out the person who originally created it in like the first few lines. I hate one of my biggest pet peeves is when people repost my thing and then they don't mention that it was a repost until the very bottom. I'm like, that's my work. So I always do it before the like drop down, just in case. And then obviously like having your handle on everything that you create so that it's like, you got to sign your work. Like that's just what it is. Otherwise it will be like reproduced and you won't get that credit. So that in terms of doing like the layouts and stuff, there's not one app that does like everything. And I don't think there should be one app that does everything because they'll inevitably do everything kind of like half as well. So I think having apps that are like for your specific process, you'll get quick at it. So just kind of like practicing.
Yeah, and I will mention the ones that you definitely the Snapseed. I wrote down the steps like Snapseed to Facetune to layout to InShot for some of like the side by sides. So very to add the text. So I might. I'm seeing a graphic, a visual being made here for me.
Yeah, totally.
So thank you so much for coming on the show and awesome. Your Instagram following and engagement and kind of what you're doing there is so refreshing. And I love watching your stories and looking at the graphics that you come up with. It's really inspirational for me, someone who struggles to be, I don't know, visually appealing and engaging. So thank you for kind of putting a model of how to do it well out there.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you in a little bit more than 2 weeks. We're going to have Chrissy Carroll on. She is Snacking and Sneakers blogger, and she's going to be talking about Pinterest and how to drive traffic to your site. If you're a blogger or want more traffic to your website, she's going to talk all about how to use Pinterest. And she is really a guru on Pinterest. So super excited to dig into that. So we'll see you. That's on the 29th. You can check out the events page on my Facebook business page. We will see you then.
Awesome.